Hi everyone, great to see you. Thanks ever so much for coming this evening. You're very, very welcome. You're welcome if it's your first time here, or if this is your fourth. I'm very impressed. This is a series Pioneer Practice, and we'll be going through the fourth theme. We've done BUC build, and now we're looking at change tonight. Fantastic to see in the chat people here from Australia, England, Scotland, Belgium, America were ones I noticed. Yeah, it looks like I've had a haircut, Phil. I have indeed had a haircut. Well spotted. Yeah, I work for CMS, and we've run Pioneer training for a while. I mean, in many ways, I think my life's been supporting pioneers, although I wouldn't known to call them that before. But over the last decade, we've been doing training, and the book over here, Pioneer Practice, I put together to try and distill together some of the practical wisdom that we've learned over that decade. And these four themes are what I distilled it down to. So tonight is going to be change. I've got three guests this evening who I'll introduce to you in a minute. Looking forward to interviewing them. It's a webinar, so there's no pressure on you to be visible on the screen. You can just sit back, relax, enjoy yourselves, as everyone's doing already. Do join in the chat. I love seeing the chat pop up. Yeah, so do get involved in that. At the bottom of your screen as well, there's a button that says Q&A. And because the chat moves quite fast, it can be quite difficult to spot questions. So if you've got a particular question for the panelists, it's better if you post that in the Q&A button at the bottom there. Then the other button, just to point out to you, is that there's a button that says CC live transcript. So if you'd like subtitles, if you click on that, you will see hopefully a reasonably accurate translation of what we're saying that comes up on the bottom of your screen. If that's appearing on your screen, if you click on it and you don't want it, if you click on it, that will turn it off. I think that's about it. This is the last one. I mean, if any of you have been here for all of them, yeah, I really enjoyed it. So thank you for that particularly. This is a partnership between CMS and HeartEdge that actually came out of a conversation at Greenbelt over a cup of coffee standing in a field. So thanks to Andy Turner for that. But Catherine, who works with HeartEdge, is here. Catherine, do you want to say hi and tell people about HeartEdge?
Yep, hello. It's great to be here again, and hello to people who are joining us for the first time. For those of you who don't know HeartEdge or who haven't heard this introduction before, HeartEdge is an ecumenical movement. It basically supports churches who are kind of rethinking their relationship with society, and particularly around the what we call the 4 C's of congregational life, compassion, commerce and culture. And as you'll have seen, this kind of webinar series is kind of structured around those, as well as around the Pioneer Practice 4 elements as well. So as we're thinking about culture this evening, I'm kind of aware that there's sort of 2 dimensions to that really. We can often think of culture as almost being synonymous with the arts, or culture as kind of like just the practices in society, the kind of the way we do things. And so really, I think this evening we're going to be looking at both those kind of aspects. And in HeartEdge, we kind of try to bring the 2 together really, because there is obviously a big overlap. And really asking the question, and I'm quoting from my colleague here, asking the question, how can the arts, culture and heritage help the church define who we are and link our church to our local community and our local identity? So they're bringing together those two aspects of culture. So I'm part of the development team, but myself and 3 other colleagues, we cover the 4 C's between us. And so as HeartEdge, what we do is we're looking at transforming practice by looking at sharing examples around the 4 C's, also sort of transforming the discourse and coming up with some programs which we hope will be transformative as well. So that's what we do. We'll be sharing in the follow-up email a link to our website and to other things which go on. And also you'll be able to get our monthly mailing as well. So that's a quick introduction to HeartEdge, and you're so welcome to join.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Great to hear about that. So we'll kick off this evening as we have other evenings. Apparently, Catherine, your English is much better than mine. At least it's the live transcript apparently is translating you better than me, but there we go. I'll try and work on my diction. But a poll, first of all, two polls to kick off this evening, as we've done each week. So tonight, the first poll is, what is most likely to derail your pioneering? Me, i.e. yourself, other people, lack of money, lack of time, a lack of skill, a lack of drive, a lack of team, resistance from the powers that be. So which of those? You can only pick one. Yeah. Oh yeah, the Ely Diocese are asking, where's the button to make me go faster? If you wait till after the webinar and you watch it afterwards, you can watch me on double speed. Yeah, I'm more excited that way. Okay, pick one of these. What is most likely to derail your pioneering? Me, other people, lack of money, lack of time, lack of skill, lack of drive, lack of team, resistance from the powers that be. Go. How are we doing, Martin?
Very good.
Okay, great. Let's have a look then. Okay, so the top answer, hang on, yeah. Just about jointly is lack of team and resistance from the powers that be. In the Pioneer Practice book, I do a survey, and the top answer in that was resistance from the powers that be. And I think second was team. So those clearly are consistently the things that are a challenge. We'll be picking up on the powers that be this evening, definitely. Team we talked a little bit about last week. A second poll, Martin. Simpler poll here. Pioneer, this is in terms of the theme of change. Do you think pioneer ministry exists to A, change the world, B, grow the church, C, be a faithful presence? And yeah, you're going to hate this because you can only pick one answer, or you can exercise the right not to vote and say what you want to say in the chat. That's also an option. So pioneer ministry exists to change the world, grow the church, be a faithful presence in terms of change.
Another 5 or 10 seconds.
Yeah, give it a few seconds more. And then let's have a look. I've not run this poll before, so I've no idea what people will say. Okay, Mo can't go with any of those. Okay, so the top answer is be a faithful presence. I think that's really interesting. I need to go away and think about this. In the book, those of you here on week 2, Anna Hembry was here, and she's written an article called The Slow Rise, which is basically precisely about that. Being present in a community over the long term is the thing that makes the change. But 23% change the world, grow the church 16. Okay, thanks, Martin. So yeah, tonight's theme is change. As I say, there are 3 ways that I think about change in that section in the book. The first one is thinking about what's the change that you want to make in the world. Most people who are pioneering are trying to think about that, and certainly when it comes to communicating to other people, trying to reflect on whether what you're doing is making an impact and so on, you have to think about a number of things in relation to that. The second one, often pioneers find themselves in systems where they can counter resistance. So there's how do you affect change in structures and systems, the second area. And the third area is when things change around you, like there's a pandemic or something, how do you navigate change in that way? We're not going to look at that last one tonight, but we'll look at the other 2. John has done another animation for tonight, slightly longer than the other ones, but I think it introduces the theme well. So we'll have a look at tonight's animation.
God's dream, the kingdom of God, is this beautiful world with everything set right, free from brokenness, creation healed. As pioneers, we are gripped by that dream of another possible world and seek to join with God's Spirit in playing a part in bringing change now, while we also anticipate a different future. At one level, it's simple. The anger or dissatisfaction we have with what is not working enables us to imagine and build something that makes a difference. That's what we're good at. But as time goes by, other questions surface. What is the best way of making that change with the time and energy and resources we have? How do you know what difference you are making? And is it possible to demonstrate or measure it? That can be important, at least for those we are accountable to and communicate with. Then invariably we meet resistance from the powers that be. Sometimes that resistance feels willful, and at other times it's just because the culture or the system is stacked a particular way. So acting to change the world leads you to having to consider how to navigate and bring change in wider structures, systems, cultures. How do you stay true and keep going when it gets really hard? It's not good to be isolated, that's for sure. Connecting with others in networks and as part of a wider movement is how the world gets changed. The world itself is changing rapidly, so pioneers need to be adaptive and flexible to ride those changes in the wider environment.
I sort of feel if we were all in the room together and could see each other, we'd all have to do one of those poses. But anyway, I like that animation from John. Thank you, John, for doing that. So I'll introduce the guests for this evening. Here we go. Thanks ever so much for joining me this evening. So if you'd like to say, first of all, just who you are, where you are and what you're up to in relation to pioneering, briefly. Tina, do you want to go first?
I'm in Sherborne, almost on the border between Somerset and Dorset, and I'm supporting pioneers across the south and southwest of England.
Great, thank you, Tina. Betsy?
Yeah, I'm in Nine Elms, which is Battersea on the south bank, almost into central London, and I'm pioneer minister in the arts. Establishing a new worshipping community and arts ministry in a very, very new development that's
Huge.
Incredible change, huge, one of the largest redevelopment areas in Europe.
And has one of the most extraordinary swimming pools I've ever seen, but suspended between two buildings near the American embassy. But anyway, we won't digress on that.
Don't go there.
Ed, great to see you. Welcome. Do you want to tell people who you are and what you're up to?
Yeah, thank you. Ed Walker, married, 3 children. I'm based in a town called Peterborough, which is just north of Cambridge. And I guess the last 11, 12 years, I've been working with churches and trying to encourage them to give the homeless a home, or those experiencing homeless a home.
Yeah, great to meet you. We haven't actually met before, so looking forward to hearing about that. You come at Heart Edge's recommendation, so looking forward to that very much. So just an opening warm-up question for you guys. Do you like change? I mean, you can say more than yes, no in response to this, but Betsy, how about you? Do you like change?
Yeah, I absolutely love change. My absolute horror is things staying the same. I think it's probably part personality, part I worked in theatre for 20 years. And there, if you have a 6-week job, you think that's a really long gig. So I think that's
okay. Yeah, Ed, how about you?
I get excited by new things for sure, but at the same time, if I've got a plan in my head, I find it quite difficult if that plan gets changed. That I'm not very naturally adaptive. That can take quite a lot out of me.
So a mix. Tina, how about you?
I love new things too. I love new challenges and new learning and new people and all those kinds of things. But I live alone, and every now and then, having put down my roots, I have to move on. And then I reflect that I have more sympathy then with the people I know in church who don't like change. I'm allowed to be sympathetic to them on those days.
Yeah. I mean, I noticed with pioneers, I think a lot of pioneers like new. In that way, and it was interesting, I think, with the pandemic, I found quite a lot of pioneers strangely energized by the change that was happening, and they were quite good at adapting and responding. I think we all got a bit fed up with it, but yeah, it's interesting. Okay, thanks guys. I look forward to talking to all of you, and we'll do a couple of exercises together as well. But first up, I will chat with you, Betsy, around Nine Elms and the arts ministry. And yeah, the Heart Edge theme is culture, and I think that's a really interesting theme because it's very much encouraging churches to engage in public space with what's going on in culture, often through the arts. So it's a great connection for Heart Edge too as well. But just paint a little bit of a picture of Nine Elms for us, for anyone who's not been there, the kind of place you're trying to work out how to do something new.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, it's not a huge geographic space, but it's an area sort of surrounding Battersea Power Station and the new US Embassy, probably the key sort of iconic places. And it's an area that was basically, you know, people haven't lived. It's not just an area of sort of gentrification in the normal way. It's an area where there was nobody living, and the sort of two parishes that it covers really will go from 12,500 population to about 40,000 over the space of 10 years. And it's predominantly high rise. You've got some existing, you know, very under-resourced social housing, butted up to absolutely uber mega wealthy properties. We've got people like the likes of Bear Grylls, Sting living there, and a brand new, basically a town centre being built. But at the moment, much of it is a building site, or lots of building sites, with 30 different developers.
Yeah, and I've been in there and had a look. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. And how early on in the development were you appointed as a pioneer there?
Oh, that's a good point. It's difficult to say sort of when it exactly started, because things have been going on there for a long time. But I suppose probably about 3 years into, I think, when sort of the work started. But it was still very much. It was still in fairly early stage. It still is in some ways. So I'd say we're probably about midway, maybe midway or just under midway through. And a colleague of mine came in a bit earlier than my role. It was a little bit later than they wanted to appoint.
Yeah, and you were specifically appointed as a pioneer in the arts. Was that the sort of diocesan decision, or did they see you and think that's a good connect, or how did that come about?
Well, I mean, yeah, the short holy answer would say, yeah, God, because it was an incredible thing that they chose. They created the post of, sort of Dean of Fresh Expressions, and that person really looked at what was happening there. And culture is very much embedding. The idea is that the South Bank, you know, which is obviously a big cultural hub, will be extended down into Nine Elms, and so culture underpins all developers have to have cultural strategies, and so I think they felt the arts and culture seemed a good way for the church to respond. And alongside that, I'd had a real sense of calling. My background's arts, I would say. I was in theatre for 20 years, to bring, for the first time after about 15 years in parish ministry, to really bring these together.
Yeah.
So it was just one of those, you know, brilliant moments.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, the first theme that we looked at was Be You, and which was basically saying that pioneering goes best when it connects with who you are. So that's terrific. You found that space. But I mean, even if you like change, what on earth do you do when you land in a new space like that with a blank sheet of paper? I mean, what did you do to get started?
I mean, basically, I said to my bosses, you know, I needed 6 months and a coffee budget, you know, so I really went along to everything that was going on. You know, there were quite a few network meetings. I just made it my business to get to know as many people. And when I say people, one of the difficulties was it was almost impossible to get to know residents in the new development, still a challenge. So really for me, it was getting to know organisations, stakeholders, developers, cultural organisations. I just, you know, talked to every possible person that would talk to me, went to every network meeting. So just really embedded myself into there. And started doing things.
Yeah, and how did the arts thing, how did you get the art stuff going then? And what have you done in that regard?
Well, I mean, we started off, I as well as the sort of, you know, I suppose I spent a lot of time connecting with a lot of the arts organisations and cultural organisations that were already there. I sort of called in a lot of favors of people that I know, back in the day as well, so that I, got myself known in those circles. And then we did a number of small pilot projects. I didn't want to start anything that said like, right, we're going to do this is going to be a weekly thing. It's just not possible. It's very different from the sort of thing where you can say, right, we'll just set up in this cafe and people will come. It's just not that sort of place. Yeah. So we needed to do things that got noticed. We did a project. The very first project we did was around refugees. It was a dance project with a school, so we could combine the school. We brought in dancers. We just invited a lot of people to it, and I think one of the things was about quality, ensuring that everything we did was of quality, so that we built up a credibility. And then we've done quite a lot of stuff around well-being. Arts and well-being is a big part of what we do.
Yeah,
I know we're going to talk about the Advent calendar, which has sort of become.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the biggest project I imagine that you've done. Although you've done some other quite big things I've noticed too. But not the Christmas just gone, the one before, when it was the Wednesday before, I think we were told there was to be no Christmas. One of the things I did to console myself was my wife and I got on our bikes and cycled into London and went round the Nine Elms Advent Trail, which was really fantastic, although we needed 2 days to do it, to try and find all the spaces because it's such a big environment. But you've got a video of that, which maybe we'll just show at the end of the interview, but tell us a little bit about that trail.
Well, it really started because when we got to, I suppose, the second Christmas, and it was, what are we going to, what are we going to do? What does Christmas look like when we don't have a building, we don't have that sort of physical presence, and it's not somewhere that you can. Most of the space is sort of private public space. There's not very much space where you can do things that you don't have to quite carefully negotiate. It's a lot of the developers are quite resistant to if we'd said, right, we're going to do a nativity, or we're going to do something like that. And we thought, well, I'd known about Advent calendars for a long time. So, I certainly didn't begin to invent it. Brilliant people like Martin Poole and Rumsey have done that for a long time. But I was looking at what can we do that brings together all these relationships, all these very different, developers, small businesses, artists. What can we do to bring those together? Because we'd already built up quite a good community of artists who were Christians. And that the calendar sort of came to me because one of the big problems around change, this is such a rapidly changing area. And one thing that we could offer was a way to help people navigate that change physically, as well as, metaphorically and spiritually. And so the calendar seemed a great way to do that. And what it's about context, so what we chose to do, lots of people do it in streets and with houses. We knew anything you do in Nine Elms has got to be big. Because it's such a huge place. So I just put out all the networks, and we contacted, and got 24 venues to agree to either bring in an artist or decorate a window around the theme. We just did Christmas carols, which was something that was quite accessible. People's interpretation of Christmas carols. We had everything from, Hark the Herald Angels to
and we'll see
Fairy Tale in New York.
we'll see a video in a minute, which will give people a flavour of that. Why don't you just grow a church? Isn't this art just a waste of time?
You were in my meeting. No, you've been in some meetings. No, apart from anything else, is that there are plenty of great churches around. Part of what we are doing in the long term, the intention is there will be can be public facing worshiping communities as a major part of what we do. But firstly, if we turned up, said, right, we're starting a church, we don't have a building, but will somebody give us a space and we'll start a church? Brutally, the doors would have been slammed in my face, is a practical answer. But also what I've discovered over the 4 years I've been here, the possibility for influencing an area. I hate that. I was going to say kingdom values. I always worry about that word values because it summons up a whole load of things. But, permeating stuff with God's presence, God's love, it can have a really profound impact. And I believe passionately that the arts and the Holy Spirit are transformative And especially together, they're really, really transformative, not just of individual lives, which they are, and that's important, but also of culture, of a whole culture, of a whole community, society, neighborhood. So
yeah, I mean, it relates to the people's answer here. I think, yeah, obviously it's a cheeky question from me, but you know, in the poll, so many people think pioneering's about presence, and I think the answer in that way really is presence. Our time's whizzed by in this interview. I'm going to show the video to close out, Betsy, but thanks ever so much. And I've been in to see it. It's absolutely terrific, and I'm sure lots of good. The connections that you're making are great, and just pray that the diocese continue to back you.
Yeah, and they have been brilliant. You know, when we talk about change, you know, they've been great. I have to say that.
Yeah, great. Okay, let's see a couple of minutes of the video.
It makes the countdown to Christmas so much more exciting.
I'm going to take this opportunity to travel this Advent calendar trail with a prayer for peace in my heart.
The windows are also varied as well. Children have become really excited to get involved. Every single one of them has played a part.
So we wanted to look at 9 Elms as 9 Elms regained, like a paradise on earth.
So each piece is focused around Christmas and giving, and how we can give peace to others and also get peace ourselves.
It's just great. I think it's, you know, especially at a time where people need outdoor engagement.
Thank you. Sorry for the abrupt ending to the video there, but yeah, terrific, Betsy. And we'll send a follow-up email out to people. So we'll send a link to your Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and whatever. People can find that video on there. But thanks ever so much. Don't go away, because we're going to do an exercise with the other guests now. But yeah, love what you're doing, and yeah, look forward to seeing how it develops.
Thanks very much. I can put a link to the video in the chat as well in case anyone wants to watch the whole thing.
Yeah, and there's some questions coming in. I mean, the name of the bishop was Rob Gillian, by the way, who's been a big supporter of the arts for years and years and years. He's a lovely guy, yeah. Okay, other guests, if you can turn videos on and then join. So we've got an exercise now. I really hope this doesn't go pear-shaped. We'll find out. Betsy, yeah, if you turn your video back on. So I've been a big fan for years of a book called Trickster Makes the World, and that book looks at the stories of trickster characters in mythology and compares them with artists. And tricksters are like Loki, Raven, Brer Rabbit, and they're kind of mischievous characters. But the significance of the book is that they're revered in cultures because they are quite significant in terms of cultural change. So that's why I'm talking about trickster with you this evening. So what I've done is been through this book and pulled out about 45 ruses or tricks of trickster And I've got a wheel that I'm going to spin in a minute, and we're going to find a ruse of trickster to help us solve a challenge. That's the no pressure, but that's the live thing. And I hope that everyone will join in the chat to help us out as well. We'll get Catherine to feed some stuff in on that. But here's the challenge. The area that you're in, you've done some research into your local community about attitudes to church. And basically, you found out that people think church is not for them. They're not good enough. And this is a particular thing. They think they'll be judged if they go. They're not good enough to show up. That's like the challenge. So what are you going to do about that? What change might we bring? Yeah, Phil Simpson saying Mullah Nasruddin is a trickster. Yes, the wise fool indeed. So we've got a trickster wheel that we're going to spin and see what ruse we come up with. Some of them are quite left field. I don't know what's going to happen. Oh, here we go. It's live. Okay, so the ruse we've got, we might try a second one in a minute, but we'll go with this, is slips the trap of instinct. So slips the trap of instinct. If you want to stop the screen share a minute, Martin, that'd be great. So yeah, I mean, in the trickster stories, sometimes, you know, you kind of affect change by not going with the natural desire or appetite or instinct. So how does that relate to what you might do in this situation? Anyone got a starter? Tina.
So in a book called Blue Like Jazz, which is amazing, the writer talks about the fact that he went to the local kind of rag week for students in an atheistic university with his Christian friends and put up a booth in the ground saying confessions here. And when everybody was drunk out of their wits in the early morning, they queued up at the door. And when they went through the door, the Christians confess the sins of the church over 2 millennia. I'd love to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's a great example of slipping the trap of instinct. Ed, Betsy, have you got anything to throw in? No pressure.
I once got asked by a reporter about homosexuality and what I thought about that and so on, and was delighted to be able to reply on the front foot and say, you know, we love people no matter what their sexuality, and I'd love to introduce you to someone who's in one of our houses. And just to be able to move from the back foot onto the front foot on that divisive, upsetting topic was and is a joy.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Betsy, no, it doesn't matter if you haven't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can top Tina's. That was just so. I just love that. But I think it's for me, it always is about listening. You know, what is it? Not trying to answer the questions, just actually trying to learn from other people. You know, I just sometimes feel like the church, since like we know the questions that people are asking, we're going to answer them, and actually it's just listening and learning and being alongside, and not expecting people to come.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the way my brain went was push it the other way. So somehow dress the church up to be extremely judging and play with it, mess with it. That was the way my brain was going. But I think we've got time for one more spin of the wheel. So let's give you a second one.
Thanks so much.
Do join in the chat if anyone wants to. Martin, do you want to give us another wheel spin? If you want to play with this wheel, by the way, I will send you a link to it in the follow-up email, so you can. Okay, so this one is holds ideas lightly, willing to have them exposed to impurity and the unintended. Holds ideas lightly, willing to have them exposed to impurity and the unintended. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Martin. Anyone got anything on that? Tina, you're nodding.
Oh, I was just nodding in a kind of thinking sort of way.
Oh.
But what came to my mind was, because I'm ordained, I didn't say that, but I was thinking about times I've been in the congregations, and people haven't known that they're not supposed to say anything, you know, and actually getting some heckle routine going on, and actually, you know, encouraging some pushback and getting into conversation with people about all the ways in which, you know, the things that I say might sound very hollow or stupid or shallow or whatever to the people who are listening, and just being the one that's willing to kind of be shown up for being a bit of a fraud, really. That's kind of the, yeah, that would be a really vibrant space, I think, for me, and scary, obviously.
Yeah, we got a suggestion coming in the chat from Ely Diocese Mission Team. I don't know who that is. Is that you, Mark Rodell? Who knows? Give people Bible passages and a pair of scissors and ask them to make it say something they'd like it to say. Yeah, I love to see that happen. Yeah, chopping up some Bible with some scissors in certain churches, that would definitely get a reaction. But I think that I like that. It's playful. That's good fun. Yeah, flip it around that way. Okay, I think we'll stop there. That's good. Thanks everyone for engaging with that. Ed, if you stay on, we'll chat about hope into action, sorry. So it's great to meet you. As I say, I know very little about Hope into Action, though I have had a nose around the website and so on, so I've got a vague idea, but tell us about Hope into Action.
Yeah, Hope into Action, we're here to serve the church, so any church of any sort of shape or size, and what we are trying to do is encourage them to outwork a form of worship, which means they give the homeless a home and journey with people out of their experience of homelessness. So our premise is there's enough Christian wealth to buy one house for every church in this country. If there are 50 people in your church and they will have £5,000 in savings accounts, which they'll never tell you about, that's £250,000 worth of wealth shared with the rich because it's put in bank accounts. If you can undam that wealth, if you can mine it, if you can mobilize it, if you can unleash it into a home for the homeless, you've got enough financial power for every house, for every church to house the homeless. That's our starting point. Well, that's how we get our homes. That's, if you like, it's a means to an end. The end is a belief that if someone has got nowhere to go, it's that's their physical poverty, but that's a function of relational poverty, and that's they have no one to go to. And the first thing God said in the Bible, his first observation was, it's not good for man to be alone. And while we can be quite intimidated by, professionals and everything else, actually they're human beings with the same DNA you and I experience and suffer. And every church is a sitting community with people trained to love their neighbor, who understand that God loves the poor and is looking for a way to outwork that in their community. And so really what we love doing is getting churches engaged in the lives of the homeless.
Yeah, brilliant. And I mean, can you give us a story, an example of, I don't know, someone who or somewhere where a community's got a house in this way and how that's played out?
Yeah, I'll give you one that came to me this week. I was speaking to someone in Portsmouth, and we often talk about holistic change. So, Jesus said, I've come to release the oppressed and proclaim the good news. Or Isaiah 58 says, this is the kind of worship I'm after, to break every yoke. There's a lady that was referred to us from a church, and I love this because it's the church working together as a network. A lady referred to us from a church in Southampton. She was vulnerable, she was in sex work, and she needed to be moved from that part of where she was living. So she ended up in our female house in Portsmouth. She was so nervous and anxious when she moved in, she couldn't unpack the suitcase. She would sleep in the wardrobe, believe it or not. Such was her fear of humans or relationships. But slowly, through many a difficult conversation and the odd argument, she began to trust the people around her. There was another church not far away in Haywards Heath where they had a dentist, and he just said, I'd love to help people in Hope into Action houses that need dentistry. And this lady had her face smashed in by her former partner, so she had no teeth from here to here. And if you ever work with people who've experienced homelessness, often their teeth is a real barrier to them getting out. It's a source of their isolation because they feel shame, and especially if they're tinged with yellow, which might be a sign of addiction or whatever, they're very conscious of that. Anyway, her teeth got fixed up for free. She couldn't believe it. Slowly she joined an Alpha. Apparently when I spoke to Tracy, she was saying, this is making sense, but if God's real, he's going to have to show up big time, really big time for me to believe it. So anyway, Tracy was going, well, okay, he might do. Anyway, turns up, Tracy was dealing with an old safeguarding case from 30 years ago that only one other person knew about. And in the middle of Alpha, this lady said, what is it with that girl in the cellar, and why is she feeling pain here and here? And then Tracy explained, well, you've got the gift of prophecy and it's on you big time. And to cut a long story short, this lady's getting baptized this month. And the reason I like that is a sense of holistic change from some of the most vulnerable, from a network of churches. It's relational change, it's physical change, it's dental change, it's psychological change, it's physical change and spiritual change. So there's a story for you.
Thanks, Ed, for this, the story. Yeah, Joe Fisher is saying starts with teeth. Love it. When I looked at your website, you've got a very sharply focused. I mean, this is in a good way in terms of you. It looks like you've thought really hard about your mission, your values. You've got a theory of change, would probably be the technical term. How have you found that process, and have you found that helpful going through that? It looks like you've done a lot of work on it.
Yeah, we have. I think if you can articulate it concisely, people can unite around it. In terms of the theory of, I could talk about the values, which we love as well, and leading by values, but in terms of the theory of change, which you pulled out, as Christians, I sometimes find Christians compete with each other. And you set up at a kind of conference and people start talking about how they've transformed lives, and someone can say to you, how do you transform lives? And that slightly jars with me now, that question. So I now answer and say, well, look, in reality, I can barely transform my own, let alone anyone else's. But what we can do, I believe, is we can create an environment. I can't change anyone's life. What we can, and by the way, I do of course believe in the Holy Spirit as a transcendent power. Of course, I believe in that. But we can create an environment where someone is more likely to make positive life choices. If someone has a safe, secure home, and if there are loving, positive relationships around them, then they are more likely to make positive decisions. But we can't control those decisions. What we can do is be a vessel for God's love. And so that's our theory of change. And we define success, therefore, have we shown love to our tenants? And some of them, we've shown tremendous love to, and they've gone back to jail. But we're still really clear it's really successful. Last week, I spoke to a lady in jail who was in our house. She felt loved. We've done great work with her. I absolutely know that. But also, so we can unite around that, I think, and that does help clearly focus us on what we're supposed to be doing. But also, if our theory of change has validity, it should be possible to validate it externally and by secular sources. You know, when Peter healed that cripple, the council who were about to flog him said, we see what you've done to this man. So they didn't argue with the miracle. So too our miracles should be validated externally. So we do spend time collecting stats. And I can tell you that last year, out of our 50 ex-offenders, those who've been in custody, 94% didn't return to jail, for example. We've got other stats. And I think that I just quote that one because that can stand up to scrutiny and that can be validated externally, but we don't count that as success. We count success. Have we created an environment where they're more likely to make a good choice?
Yeah, I mean, that illustrates the value of measurement. I mean, pioneers to and fro on these things, but I kind of liked your website because it's an example of engaging well with that. Our time's up, I'm afraid, Ed, but it's lovely to meet you, and we'll send in the follow-up email. I mean, people can Google it, but I will send a link to your website and anything else you want. So thanks ever so much. Do stay on because we're going to do another exercise in a minute. But Catherine, I don't know if there are any questions coming in. Sorry, I haven't brought you in yet. Are there any Q&A?
That's okay. I think a lot of the questions have been answered by different panelists as we've been going along.
Great.
I think I'd quite like to just flag up one that has been answered, I think, by Tina, but just as a more general question. At the very beginning, somebody was saying that it would be just good to hear a bit about how pioneering is going to shift things, is likely to shift things in the church over the longer term. And that's quite a sort of general question. I don't know if you want to try and field that one, Jonny.
I'm going to talk to Tina about change in a diocese in a system called the church. So yeah, we'll pick that up in the conversation with Tina, I think. Yeah, I mean, that leads nicely into our next exercise. So perhaps Tina and Betsy, you could come back in at this point. So this second exercise, you can relax slightly on this one. There's no trickster wheel involved or anything. It's just a question, really, which I asked this question in a survey and published a sort of condensed version of the answers to it in the Pioneer Practice book. And I loved the answers so much. I feel like I want it as a poster on the wall. But the question was, what tactics have you learned about change within structures or systems? And I wonder if each of you could give one tactic. I mean, I'd love in the chat, by the way, everyone else to chuck in your tactics, because I found the wisdom of the crowd on this before really helpful. But Betsy, have you got a tactic about change that you've learned?
I don't know whether it's a tactic. It's not very, revolutionary. But I mean, for me, I think it's relationships and quality which equal trust. And I think it's that building that trust. And I think both in terms of the changing church systems, I'm not saying that from the moment I started to change them, but starting that work, building really going deep into relationships with people, even people that you maybe don't feel you've got a natural connection to. But
yeah, I think that's really, really good. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you think it's revolutionary or not, but that's so foundational, because where that isn't there, things are going to break down. So yeah, relationships with those, and you've built that well in Southwark, I'm led to believe. So that's good. Ed, have you got a tactic?
I can tell you what not to do. Often when I get a door slammed in my head or face even, I can be tempted to feel very angry and quite self-righteous, and I find myself thinking about Jesus turning tables and verses coming to mind where he was very angry with people, and I'm thinking they must be Pharisees or I must be Jesus. I found actually it's better to shake the dust off your feet than turn the tables in someone's face, because and play the long game in your relationships. So just to support what Betsy says, play the long game in the relationships.
Yeah, and one of the things is, I think in the tactics that came through, but I was mentioning, was to resist sending that email when someone annoys you. Yeah. Tina, how about you? Have you got a tactic?
I'm not sure it's a tactic, but I do kind of resist expectations. The change that I want to see is all around playfulness. So it's not common in the church. So particularly if I'm speaking to people with senior posts or responsibility, I'll try, if I'm invited into any part of their space, then I'll bring something playful. So it's a kind of strategy of positive disruption, if you like. So you're just subverting business as usual and throwing people a little bit out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I mean, tonight are the outro slides that play at the end that you could stay and watch or watch them later. I've actually put on those slides a sequence of the tactics that people suggested that are in the book. So if you hang around, you can see those tactics later. But Tina, I'll chat to you now, if that's okay. Thanks everyone. So, Tina, my opening question for you, I mean, there's an assumption in it, is why is it so hard to change the culture in the church? I mean, that's the space you've been in.
Well, I think the answer is always God, really, because if you've got something and you think God's told you to do it, then it's very scary to change it, isn't it? You've got that you've got the ultimate authority saying it has to be like this. And actually, I think you can, as somebody in power in the church, you can inadvertently play to that if you don't want things changed. And I think over the last 400 years, the way that faith has been framed has been around what we believe. So somehow trying to make the belief more and more correct just digs it in deeper and deeper and deeper, and then hard to shift. Yeah, so a lot of things really. I think the other one thing I'd like to suggest is that it's because the Bible's such a big open conversation. If you're trying to choose the values that you're going to build the church on, your new church, how on earth do you choose? Are you going for the Beatitudes or love your neighbour as yourself or the 10 Commandments? Where are you going to go and how do you agree on that?
Yeah. You were a pioneer, you still are, but you had taken a role pioneering in Portishead, and did a terrific job there. And then for some strange reason, you took on a role in a diocese trying to change things. So tell us about that change, and when you, yeah, I mean, you could either say when you took that on, what did you do, or looking back, what, you know, how do you change a diocese in that way? How do you think about changing a system, and what did you do particularly that worked?
Well, I think I knew that it was God's change. I wouldn't have taken it on without that. I really felt the wind of the Spirit. I didn't want that role. I wouldn't have done it voluntarily. There was a very long, strong, persuasive tune going on in my head to say that this was my role, and I had been kind of called into it. So I just used the things I already knew, I think, from other parts of my learning life, like stuff I'd learned in Portishead, all pioneering in all kinds of ways, came into that space, and so did my previous professional life, and then so did watching people like you do what you did and other pioneers I admired. So it's kind of bringing all that together. There was a very important book in my reading, that's the one about the tipping point. So you just need to get to about 18% of the majority to kind of buy into something, your innovators and your early adopters, and then the system starts to change. And the church, I think, in any change system has a hugely long tail. So once you've got to 18%, it's probably still going to be another 100 years, but at least you've got over the back of it. So things I didn't know I knew how to do. One was that when I came to Bath and Wells, God had said to me, as kind of the confirmation that I should apply, was go and let the wild rumpus begin. And some of you all know that. And so Paul Bradbury, who I've worked with on the Pioneer project, he said, Tina, I think what you did was create a new imaginary, which it's a lovely word, isn't it? I was like, oh, I'm glad I created one of those. But it's kind of like, it was what I could already see in my heart, in God's imagination, and it was about giving it form. So when the CMS certificate started up in Bath and Wells, which was through funding from the Strategic Development Fund bid. So you need to know, if you're listening, that I was actually given £3 million to do this. It wasn't just, you know, small change in the back pocket. It was a lot of money. So here is the first cohort of the CMS certificate in Bath and Wells, sort of trying to be those friendly monsters and disruptors in the previous picture. And I sometimes think, you know, what do people think about me using this as a kind of way of talking about Jesus, particularly not the pioneer sorts? But my office was called the Dreamery. We got an online space from Gather, which I called Rumpus Land. But the thing is, with these kinds of words and images, if you just show a few more of the images, what they do is kind of call people to you who get it. So it's a sort of secret code for gathering your pioneers. And I told people when I went to Bath and Wells that I was looking for all the pioneers that I knew God had called, but the church hadn't recognized or welcomed. And so I started putting out images of what it meant to be a pioneer. And it's so rare to see anything about church work that doesn't have a cross or a Bible or a man in a dress. Or some flowers on a table telling you to come and do this stuff. And I wanted images that talked about risk, play, adventure, fire, being together. And these ads in the Church Times were fighting alongside the sort of normal black and white print ones. So I think that's what happened initially. And then there was something about embodying the change I wanted to see. So, you know, I went to the 9 lessons and carol service in the Bishop's Chapel and played Pass the Parcel, which pleased some and others really hated. But you're starting to kind of break the mold. And yeah, and then there was loads more that we did, but that's the kind of headline of how you start to begin to create a new imaginary. Do you want any more? How am I
No,
doing?
we're getting a feel for it. That's great. And I mean, in the poll earlier, the top answer to, what's most likely to derail your pioneering is resistance from the powers that be. I mean, I don't want you to put yourself in a difficult position by whatever you say next, but I mean, presumably it wasn't all straightforward. There were challenges in terms of any system or culture, whether it's, the NHS, the council, or the church. So how was navigating the powers?
Well, I was very, very blessed in a way, because I had I had two powerful permission givers, one who created the space for the SDF bid and a bishop. They were very pro, but also slightly absent. I wouldn't say that they were anti. It wasn't really navigating the powers that be. It was more working with people who didn't recognize that God was at work in this. And I found that incredibly painful, because you're like, well, you're in the church and we're all listening to the same Holy Spirit. How can you not see that this is a really beautiful, powerful, extraordinary thing that's going on? But I did have one powerful person who did dig their heels in and say, until I've worked out that this is right and I've done the research, I'm not going to take it on anybody else's word. So that slowed us down by quite a long time, and we had to work through all that, and I had to bring in other people to kind of advocate for me and make a case from that person's tradition of the church, so that they were willing to give the green light on things that only they could give the green light on.
Yeah, I mean, the theme that we touched on the second week was see, and it's so common what you're saying, and somebody's just saying it in the chat, I think, that how can you not see? I think for pioneers, what we see is so obvious because we see it, that it's always quite shocking when people can't seem to see what's happening. And I think that's often a kind of clashing point, I think. I mean, how long do you think this sort of system change takes in a institution?
Well, I know when I came for my interview, I said it's 5 years to begin to start the change, and 25 years before we begin to see any real change, and 50 years before it's the norm, I think. But amazingly, and things have happened faster than I thought they were going to, right at the, way back when I became pioneer. I looked back about 3 or 4 years ago and thought, oh my word, this has to be God, because I couldn't have seen any of this happening this quickly in Church of England terms.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. I mean, I think it's terrific that you're doing that in that space. And I think in terms of pioneering, we often think of the pioneers who are going to the edges and doing the thing, but actually that pioneering within systems and structures is a great gift, and it's a hard role. I think it requires a sort of bilingual thing. You get energized being with the pioneers, and then you're trying to change the system. It's frustrating, it's too slow, people can't see it, and all of that. But I think it's great. We definitely, tactically, we need people in both those kind of spaces, I think. So yeah, thanks ever so much. It's good. Catherine, are there any questions for Tina or coming in at all, or comments in the chat you want to pick up on?
In terms of questions, not specifically for Tina, there's a question here about saying that most of the contributors are relatively young. I'm in my 80s. Do you have any specific links with geriatric pioneers? So maybe that's one that Tina can field as a youngster.
Yeah, you can be a pioneer at any age. You might have been pioneering all your life. It's just about being the you and seeing what God's showing you and acting on it. I think most people who are pioneer advocates and enablers would love to hear from you.
Yeah, no, I think that's terrific. Yeah, I was up in Liverpool last weekend doing a thing with some pioneers up there, and there were quite a few people that were retired there who were doing fantastic things in their community, partly because they, had the availability of time and so on. And I remember my mum saying to me when she was 75, talking about, she'd never think, she'd be horrified if I talked about her and used the word pioneer, but here I am. But she said to me at that age, what do you think about this? I think I've got another adventure in me. And I thought, yeah, I really hope I'm saying that at 75, you know. So yeah, brilliant. Go for it. Okay, I mean, our time is just about up. This series is coming to an end, but I thought I'd just ask one last takeaway from all of the guests in terms of pioneers who want to, well, I was going to say want to change the world, but actually they want to be present in the world and join in with what God's doing. But one last thought that you'd all like to share with them as a takeaway. Ed?
Well, I've been tremendously encouraged by everything here. I think perseverance is really important. It's sort of an undervalued quality in the Bible. So yeah, I just say persevere.
Yeah, persevere. That's good. Yeah, Betsy?
I'd say don't expect it to be easy, but make it fun. Work to your strengths and let it be joyful.
Yeah, thanks. Tina?
I'm going to be a trickster and sneak in two. Number one, tell stories. Number two, move into whatever space is available to you and occupy all of it.
Yeah, very good. Okay, well, thanks ever so much to the guests. As I say, I'll send in the follow-up email links to the various things that they're involved in so you can see that. Just a few last things. Let me just share screen again. Yeah, just a few sort of noticey plug type things. But one of the things I've learned over the years, perhaps more than anything else, is that you need other people in, whether it's in pioneering or anything else. And I think it's movements that change the world. So connect together with other people. I saw in the chat that I think it was Peter Armstrong was saying that he'd been meeting with other people talking about stuff and what to do. And it's so great to connect with other people. So make sure you connect with other people is one of the takeaway things. Then in terms of plugs, CMS, we absolutely love pioneers in every shape or form, and over the years I think it's the thing I've enjoyed the most in my life has been developing the pioneer training and finding out what wonderful gift pioneers bring. If you're interested in what we're up to, find the website, but we got some open days coming up. Again, I'll send this in the follow-up email, but we're running training undergrad level, so certificate, diploma, degree. We've got two different MAs. Well, they kind of integrate, but one has a focus on African diaspora and the other pioneer mission, and then they share half the modules. And then we also now running a doctoral program. Got about 15 people on that, so do have a look at that. And we got a number of hubs around the country. I think Gav just posted this in the chat, but if you want to meet with other pioneers, I cannot wait for this, I have to say. Over the double bank holiday in June, we've got a gathering on Anglesey, which is quite a long way from where I am. It depends where your start point is, but it's beautiful. I went there recently with see the site. This is the photo from there. So if you're interested in that, I'll send that in the follow-up. But that really is going to be a space to kind of hang out, connect with other pioneers. Heartedge, Catherine, anything to say from you on Heartedge anymore?
No, just say, yeah, please have a look at the website there. As it says you can join as an individual or a church, and you'll see more details in the follow-up email. And no, just also thanks to you, Jonny, and guests tonight and on the other evenings for a great time.
Yeah, and then if you're interested in the stuff, I mean, do get hold of the book. With this code, you can get it for £10. It's nearly 200 pages full colour, so that's pretty good value. But I think the kind of thing that Peter was talking about, it's ideal for meeting with other people, getting conversations going about what you're doing. So do, if you want to get hold of that. And thank you, a couple of thank yous. Big thank you to Heartedge and CMS for putting this on together. Thank you to Martin, who honestly has just been fantastic. I mean, I did post a photo the other week on Facebook. It is a lot more popular than most of my Facebook entries of Martin under the stairs, who's running the tech side of things. There's quite a lot going on. And Yeah, sorry, the other thing I was going to say, a few people have asked about the animations that I've shown. I'm not going to be making them available to you at the moment, I'm afraid, because I'm going to be touring Pioneer Practice around the country. I mean, at the moment, it looks like about 20 to 25 dates, and I will put this in the follow-up. But if you're interested in hosting, I'd love to come where you are, doing most of those with Gav, actually. So yeah, we're using animations in that. So I'm not making them available, but we will make them available after that. Yeah, and there'll be a link to the recording from this session and all 4 sessions afterwards. And in fact, yeah, probably in a couple of weeks' time, we will be making them available publicly on Heartedge and on CMS's YouTube channel. I've just got to check with all the guests that they're happy for that before we do that. So they will be made available. I've absolutely loved doing that, meeting all of the guests. I really appreciate everyone who's taken part, and I've loved the chat and all of you taking time in January to show up. Some of you 4 Thursdays in a row is very pleasing that there are people that want to do that, and thank you for the gift that you guys bring in terms of pioneering. And then we're not particularly going to do a follow-up survey to get loads and loads of feedback from you. It was free. You've posted loads of comments in the chat. But if you do have ideas or particular thoughts, then just respond when the email comes around. You could send a reply. In that, there'll be my email address, and I'll put Catherine's in as well. If you've got any thoughts, do come back to me. Last year I did a series on creativity, which was a lot of fun. I really loved that. Done this on Pioneer Practice. I don't know if I'll do another series next January or not, but if you've got any thoughts on it, I kind of think January is a good time because it's dark and cold and miserable, and what else is there to do? But if you have got thoughts on that, do let me know. I mean, one I was wondering about is earlier on there were quite a lot of questions about mission and colonialism. So I wondered if we might do something in that space on decolonizing mission, but that might not be everybody's cup of tea. Sounds a bit intense. But anyway, if you've got thoughts on that, let me know. And as before, there'll be an outro, some scrolling images, and some of those will be around tactics for change. So do have a look at that if you like. And yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I don't know what I'm going to do next Thursday, but I will think of you all. Much love.
Well done, Johnny. You did a great job. I don't know if you can hear me, but did a great job.
Cheers. you.